I started my career at 30K salary and ended up at 300K, about 10X-ing that.
What if I told you the secret to earning more is dead simple and something you could easily do? Today we interview Bonnie, who 10X'd her tech sales salary in just a few years. And now she's a career coach teaching others how to do the same.
If you are not learning, earning, and growing, then you move on. As great as you could be at a company, if you stay there and they just aren't giving you more than 10%, they're not going to one day wake up and be like, hey, here's 50% because you've been so great at your role.
We'll break down step by step how to negotiate with your boss to get that salary you deserve.
Once you have set skills that are different from everybody else and you can make yourself valuable, that's when you actually get leverage.
This is her career playbook.
So Bonnie, the first question I have is, if I wanted to 10X my salary like you, what are the things that I should be thinking about?
The first thing is actually getting a job where you could learn all of the skills that you need to be to actually be valuable. So for myself, I started at really large companies that had very set processes because I knew nothing when I was starting out in sales. So going to a super structured environment, I could learn all of the different outputs and inputs that then allowed me to get a pretty big range of skills to then take to smaller companies. So then I could succeed in smaller roles that weren't as defined. So really getting that baseline at a large company, learning the skills, learning everything you can, even if the salary might not be great starting out, and then not being afraid to know all of the skills that you have and take that jump to the next place and then negotiate that way. Because once you have set skills that are different from everybody else and you can make yourself valuable, that's when you actually get leverage to be able to move through the ladder at different companies to increase your salary.
Can we dig into the specifics a little bit more on your personal story? Like I know, for example, your journey is you started making around 30K and then you ended up at 275K, which is a huge 10X jump. What are some of the skills that you're talking about? Or what is your journey by going to that big company and taking that and marketing yourself in a different way?
So the first job I ever had was a hustler position, I'll say. So I was cold calling about 100 local business owners every single day, trying to sell them advertising. So it wasn't glamorous by any means. I had a manager tracking every single dial I made, every single call was recorded, but really working to elevate my own game in that role. Then once I learned how to sell, all of the basics, how to objection handle, how to have high output, but actually increase things like my close ratio so that I actually could sell a lot more than my peers. Then I moved into a management role at that same company. So once I was managing a team of about like 10 to 14 people, and I was teaching all walks of life, people that have never sold anything to anybody, I was teaching them how to sell from zero baseline. So then once I understood the management skills, the leadership skills, plus also the individual contributor skills of sales, that's what then led me to make my transition more so to a SaaS sale. I transitioned actually from selling advertising to selling payroll software. And from there, I gained a really good understanding of how a longer sales cycle works, but I still wasn't making obviously the amount that I wanted to. So once I had all of those different types of skills, from management to really high volume transactional selling skills to then after that, more complex sales and relationship building, that's when I went to my first startup. And the interesting part about the first startup is it was actually a compensation software. So learning the ins and outs of how companies actually decipher all of the things that we obviously want to know, right? We want to understand how we get paid, how we could get promoted. Once I understood that negotiation is just a game and it's all based on the skills that you could provide to your next employer. And funny enough, I got recruited from an international company, same kind of industry, so still compensation software, but now I was the head of sales at that company because I learned everything at the startup. So understanding all of those pieces of the puzzle is what allowed me to then be able to negotiate my salary, negotiate getting promoted, and really get to that level of going from 35K to 300K in a couple of years.
A jump like that in your salary is never an overnight change, right? Going from 35K to 300K. Could you walk us through your salary progression a little bit? And what was that inflection point that took the big jump to get up to that high number?
Yeah. When I was at my first company, so I stayed there for about 5 years. So that was the large company that I worked my way up for. I was making 35K on base salary for the first year, 40K base salary for the second year. Then when I went to management, I think my base salary was around 50K or so. Of course, with commission, it was closer to, I would say, double that for each of those. But then really what I realized is after managing for 3 years there and working there for 5 years, my salary only really grew a little bit, right? That's what then led me to make the first jump. And I think the hardest part about getting a new job or even having a new opportunity to increase your salary is just deciding from that first job that I could do better than this and I want to do better than this. So while my salary at the second job, it wasn't that drastic of a difference, it gave me that groundwork to then go to the third job, the startup, where I was still making, I would say, it was like 87 and a half on base and then 87 and a half on commission. So total about 160 to 170K, but I was very successful in that role. So then once I had the confidence that I could make that money, I wasn't going to leave that role unless I knew I could double it for that next role. And then that's what was the big jump to then getting an 180K base salary as a head of sales. So I think it's a culmination of those 3 other companies, of learning from really big companies, then going to a smaller company, being successful there, and then knowing what your confidence levels actually are and what you bring to the table to ask for what you deserve at that next role.
I feel like negotiation is one of those things where it's both an art and a science. Like you have to go out and collect the data points to inform yourself, but you also have to play the politics behind it and you have to communicate and negotiate with the other party effectively. But what's one thing that people get wrong about going about their negotiation process or trying to get a promotion?
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of places that people go wrong, honestly. People try to negotiate or they try to get promoted when they don't have leverage. And the first thing that they need to do is actually build up that leverage and that visibility before they ask for what they need. For an example, if I go up to my boss one day and I'm like, hey, I've been working really hard, I need a raise, he's going to say, I don't care that you're working hard, politely. Everybody works hard on this team. If I could say, hey, I sold more than the entire San Francisco team and I'm still getting paid the exact same way as them, I want to stay at this company. I love what I do. However, I have another offer and I feel that unless you can match me where I'm at, it doesn't make sense for me to continue there. That's going to create some friction. So the company actually needs to move, right? Because if you negotiate and they know that you're still going to be doing the exact same level of work for the exact same rate, you're not going to really get anywhere. But if there is some sort of, I did and accomplished, this is why I deserve X, and here's the impact that this would have if I don't receive what seems fair to me, that's how you could actually get some leverage. And it might not be everything that you asked for, everything that you wanted. Of course, there's always things like timeline, there's things like budget, but you should be giving them also a few different options. So like with negotiation in general, if you just say, hey, I want this, you're going to see that you're going to get a yes or a no answer. But if you can say, hey, I want this, but also if that doesn't work, here's another option that I think would make sense. And here's what's in it for you. So also framing it when you're negotiating with somebody, why is it important for the other person on the end of the line to give you what you want, right? If I'm saying, I want to get double the salary and there's nothing for them, they're not going to do that. But if I say, I need double the salary because right now I'm at another job, and if I quit that job, I'm leaving all of this commission on the table. So if you want me to start by this date, I need to get this amount to be able to leave the other money. That then makes sense for both parties because they're getting me to start for an earlier start date, let's say, and I am not leaving hundreds of $1,000s at my current role.
I think there's a lot of people that will get into the negotiation room and they might have, let's say, the highest offer on the table. Let's say, like, to the example where you were making 85,000-ish a year and then someone offered you 180,000. What if you wanted to ask for even more than that? Like, do you have any guidance there? Because it still is your best offer, right?
I think it depends on what levers you want to pull, right? Because everybody says that base salary is the only thing that you could be negotiating for. But if you know that a company is a larger company and they're not going to have that flexibility, you should be getting a little bit more creative with how you ask. So I always say ask for as much as you can and as much makes sense, but you don't want to screw yourself over in the process by getting, let's say, eliminated from that role because you're going over the budget. But there are other components, like maybe it's a sign-on bonus, maybe it's a different bonus structure or a commission structure that you want. Maybe you want to play around with the remote versus in office. There's so many different ways that you could get creative with it. And that's why I say give the other options. So negotiating at the very beginning, I think, is one of the most important pieces. And of course, reading the room, understanding where you fall within their budget or the salary range.
And how do you suggest people understand the budget available? Because I know a lot of jobs today in certain states, they will provide salary transparency on the job, but a lot of places still don't.
That's a good question. I think it depends on a few things. One is going to be the size of the company. So if it's a super small company and you see maybe they haven't raised money in 3 years, they're probably not going to be swimming in cash and it might be a little bit tighter. If you see they just raised a round of funding, okay, they just got $10 million, that's public information, they probably have a little bit of wiggle room. If it's a big public company where you're seeing a salary range posted and you already see that there's, let's say, 15 people that are in your exact role, it's probably going to be harder to negotiate something very outside of that budget just because there's other people internally that would affect if they were to give you more. But if it's a new location or a new position, for example, like I was the first US employee when I was the head of sales, they were based in India, they don't understand what market is. So I could negotiate based off of my skills versus based on other people in seat versus based on their budget. So they could have still said no to me, but just because they didn't have a full team that was already doing that work gave me the confidence to understand what the pay should be for my commitment to a role like that.
One group of people just stay at a company and they're like, hey, I'm going to, stay loyal and try to climb my way up. But compare that to somebody who's hopping around and finding new companies and hopefully hotter companies. They're able to typically increase their salaries a lot quicker. So like, what's been your experience? What have you seen with either your clients or perhaps your coworkers of people that either stayed in the same company or like switched jobs aggressively?
Again, this is controversial, but my take is switching jobs aggressively will get you way higher pay bumps if you're qualified. So a regular promotion or merit increase, if you're in the same role, is really only like 4 to 10%, let's call it. So that's the max that you're going to get every single year. Now, if you job hop, the recruiting budget is always very different than the internal employee's increased budget. So realistically, you can get 20K, 30K, 40K more than your previous role just by going to a company that is willing to invest in the type of work that you're doing. And if you do that after you gather all the skills and are able to then successfully interview and get multiple jobs, that's how you're going to really escalate the compensation quicker, in my opinion. Because as great as you could be at a company, if you stay there and they just aren't giving you more than 10%, they're not going to one day wake up and be like, hey, here's 50% because you've been so great at your role. So I think if it's about job hopping, I always say once you understand everything, meaning you're not learning any new information, you don't feel like there's more to do in terms of like promotion, you're not trying to climb up the ladder, or you're not earning. If you are not learning, earning, and growing, then you move on to that next role and you talk about everything that you already did to understand those skills, learn, and why you want to move to that next place. But I also don't think that it needs to be, oh, I didn't get promoted this year, oh, I didn't get a raise one time because of this situation, let me leave, even if the company is providing all of these other amazing opportunities for you. So it's a balancing act, but you'll probably make way more money if you job hop.
A lot of people will see your compensation and say like 300K is a lot of money and it's a lot of money to walk away from. And we know recently you started focusing more on your career coaching business. So could you talk us more about like why you walked away from that 300K?
Great question. I think there's a lot of different factors. Once you start at 35K, your whole goal is to rise your way up through the ranks, right? You want to make all of the money in the world. You want to triple your commission. You want to get to that point where you could feel like you're really successful. But for me personally, once I got to 10 years in tech sales and I was making all of that money, I found that I still liked helping and mentoring other people more than I liked closing deals myself. And I know that's not the same for every person. Some people stay in sales forever and love being an individual contributor and just making their own money nonstop. But I felt like I learned everything I wanted to learn within sales. I grew to where I wanted to grow my career. And there were so many things that I had to figure out along the way myself. And there was no rule book. There was no playbook. It was just failing and succeeding again, that I wanted to just make it a lot easier for new people that don't understand some of the concepts when you first join the workplace to just get ahead, because it took me 10 years to figure out how to job hop, how to negotiate, how to get promoted, how to build leverage. But my cup is more filled when I teach other people and they succeed versus me just doing the same thing that I was already doing.
Well, Bonnie, before we wrap up, where can people generally find you online? You've got your own business, you've got socials as well.
BonnieSwartz.com is my website. So that tells a little bit more about what I'm doing, how I help mostly women right now negotiate, get promoted with their hiring, interviews, all of that fun stuff. And then on TikTok at Bonnie Swa, SWA.